I was halfway through my second glass of Pinot when Ellis leaned in close, his hand brushing mine under the table. The party buzzed around us, champagne flutes, clinking silverware on china Sutton, laughing too loudly 2 seats over. Lyra was glowing across the room, her hand looped around Cassian Vaughn's arm as he guided her through a crowd of well-dressed strangers that now called themselves family. Ellis's voice barely rose above a whisper. "That man tried to marry my brother." I blinked, certain I'd misheard. "What?" He didn't look at me. His eyes were still locked on Cassian. Different name, same face, and just like that, the air left my lungs. I stared at the man in question, the one who just toasted my 24-year-old niece with a story about how she brought poetry back into his life. The one who called me Aunt Malin, even though I'd only met him in person once before this weekend. He looked ordinary. Tailored navy suit, trimmed beard a tan that said Aspen in winter, not drywall or debt. But Ellis, he wasn't the type to mistake a face. "You're sure?" I said, barely moving my lips. He finally turned to me. "Malin, I'd bet my license on it." I didn't respond. I couldn't not with the room spinning and the blood suddenly pulsing behind my ears. It was Lyra's engagement party. It was supposed to be beautiful, controlled, safe. And now it felt like I'd stepped into someone else's story. A trio of string musicians shifted into a cover of Coldplay's Fix You and I stood smoothing the front of my navy wrap dress. Across the lawn, fairy lights danced in the early evening breeze strung across beams that Sutton insisted be flown in from Santa Fe to match her rustic but not too rustic vision. Everything was perfect. And I suddenly didn't trust a moment of it. I walked toward the dessert bar on autopilot, trying to ignore the weight of Ellis's words. I was Malin Croft, and I didn't rattle easily. I made a career out of not flinching, whether in mediation rooms, asset disputes, or family implosions. At 51, I'd spent most of my life being the safe harbor, the one who kept calm when my mother fell apart, when Sutton disappeared for days in her 20s, when Lyra's father bailed before her first birthday. I hadn't planned on being the backbone. It just happened. I was good at it. And now I stood next to a display of lemon tarts and chocolate ganache bites, wondering if I needed to become something else entirely. Ellis joined me a moment later, holding 2 espresso cups. He handed one to me without speaking. I sipped, not tasting. "Tell me everything," I murmured. "It was 6 years ago," he said, still watching the party as though it were a chessboard. "My brother got engaged to a woman named Mallory Cross. Said he met her at a philanthropic conference in D.C. She was gorgeous, brilliant. Too good to be true, obviously. I said nothing. They were engaged within 6 months. Then just gone. She vanished, but not before opening a line of credit in his name and clearing out his personal savings. My brother barely avoided criminal charges for a shell company he didn't even know existed. The authorities said it was part of a wider confidence scheme, financial, emotional, even identity fraud. Never caught her. Only lead was a blurry airport security photo. I felt my stomach twist. "And you're saying that woman Mallory is Cassian Ellis?" Didn't flinch. "Not exactly. But the man standing over there, that's the same person who walked out of my brother's life with over $100,000 and a forged power of attorney." I couldn't breathe. Lyra was leaning into him now, smiling up at him like he'd built her a fairy tale from scratch. "He said he worked in sustainable real estate," I muttered. "That he wants to take her to Paris for a year and build something lasting." Ellis's jaw tightened. "He said the same thing to my brother, except it was Berlin." I excused myself and slipped behind the white tent to the side garden. The coolness of the mountain air helped. I gripped the railing of the wooden footbridge and stared out at the stream below. Was it possible? Was Lyra about to marry a con artist? Was my sister Sutton being duped too, or worse, was she part of it somehow? Not even Sutton would go that far. Would she? I stayed outside longer than I meant to, long enough to hear the applause that followed Cassian's speech. Family is a choice, he had said earlier, and I couldn't have chosen better. It sounded beautiful, almost made me believe it, but I kept thinking about Ellis's face, about how pale he looked, how tightly he held his espresso cup. I wasn't impulsive, never had been, but something about Cassian Vaughn, or whatever his name really was, felt wrong all the way down to the bone. And I'd learned a long time ago to trust the bone. The question now was whether to say something. Ruin the party, blow up my sister's illusions, humiliate my niece, or stay silent until I had proof either choice could destroy someone I loved. I stared back toward the glowing tent. Lyra had just stepped up beside Cassian, her hand in his. She looked radiant. She looked doomed. And I, Malin Croft, the eldest daughter, the quiet protector, the one who always cleaned up after the storm, I had no idea if I was already too late. By the time I rejoined the party, the light had shifted. The sun was beginning its descent behind the peaks, gilding everything in a honey hue that made even the rented florals look wild and alive. Sutton had hired a photographer from New York to capture natural moments, and I saw her hovering at the edge of the lawn, clicking away as if she were documenting something sacred. Maybe she was. Engagements are strange, like that equal parts promise and illusion. Lyra stood under the wooden archway, strung with eucalyptus and cream roses, laughing at something Cassian had just whispered in her ear. Her cheeks were flushed, her hair half up in soft curls, and her hands kept fluttering unconsciously toward him like a bird testing a branch she wasn't sure would hold. Cassian didn't flinch. He stood, grounded and anchor in Italian leather shoes, sipping champagne and speaking with that low, effortless voice that made everything he said feel curated, like it had been rehearsed in the mirror and polished with just enough humility to make it believable. "He's a natural storyteller," Sutton said beside me, almost dreamily. I hadn't heard her approach. I turned to her, startled by the softness in her voice. She usually didn't speak that way, wistful, girlish. Sutton was the youngest of us, but she had always carried herself with the authority of someone who believed the world owed her charm in return for her presence. Seeing her so deferential made me feel like I'd stepped into an alternate version of our family. "He's telling Lyra about that property in Montmartre," Sutton continued. "You know, the one that was a defunct artists' co-op. He's working with a Parisian firm to turn it into a sustainable boutique hotel. He said they might go out there for the winter. Isn't that romantic? That wasn't the word I would have chosen." I watched Lyra's eyes go wide as Cassian gestured with his glass, clearly painting the picture. Paris in winter, long scarves, and rain-slick cobblestones, their names etched together on the brass door of a building with ivy-covered walls. She looked completely under his spell. "He's been so generous," Sutton added, reaching for a canapé, but not eating it. "He's even offered to help me fund the new gallery space I've been looking at downtown. Says it's an investment in the family. Honestly, may this kind of support well, you know how long I've tried to make something real happen." I knew. I'd heard versions of this speech since we were teenagers. Sutton always wanted something to call her own, something with her name on the wall, but she never quite stayed long enough in one vision to build it. Her dreams were beautiful, but brittle. "And the gallery account?" I asked, keeping my voice even. "Oh, it's all above board," she said quickly. "He helped me with the business plan, connected me with a guy he knows who's done some private funding work in Aspen. They said my credit wouldn't qualify on its own, but with a co-signer or a joint holder with better collateral history." Her eyes flicked toward me and then away. "You use my name," I said. Quiet. Not accusatory, just fact. Only for the initial setup, she said, brushing it off with a little wave. "It was just to reserve the account while we waited on paperwork. You've got great credit. I wasn't going to use it, I just didn't want to lose the lease on the space." She looked at me, then all bright-eyed and hopeful, and for a moment I didn't see a grown woman with a grown daughter. I saw my little sister begging me to sign her out of school early because she'd forgotten about a field trip. That same exact look. It used to work on me. But now it made my spine go cold. Cassian approached just then, his hand grazing the small of Lyra's back as they walked. He saw us and smiled. "My favorite ladies," he said smoothly. "Planning world domination." Sutton giggled. Actually giggled. I couldn't remember the last time she'd laughed like that, certainly not in my presence. "We were just talking about your Paris project," she said. "Ah, yes," he said, slipping an arm around Lyra's waist. "Montmartre. It's going to be a jewel. I can see her there. Can't you? Lyra in a little atelier above the hotel, sketching out her poetry on handmade paper café au lait in one hand, the Seine just blocks away. Lyra tilted her head against his shoulder and smiled at me, like this was all perfectly normal, like this wasn't a man who, if Ellis was right, once disappeared with another man's life savings. That sounds lovely, I said. Cassian held my gaze for just a second too long. Not aggressive, not challenging, just measuring. You know, he said, Lyra tells me you're the glue, the quiet strength of the family. I like that. Families need someone steady. Steady. It sounded like praise, but it felt like positioning. I do what I can, I said, mildly. He nodded. Ellis, your husband, right? He's the orthopedic surgeon. You two seem solid. We need more couples like you in the world. I nodded, but something about the way he said solid felt strategic, like he was ticking boxes, confirming data. Lyra tugged his arm. Come meet Jillian. She's dying to talk to you about that co-op in Boulder. Of course, he said, kissing her temple. My muse calls. As they walked away, I glanced at Sutton. She was already scrolling through her phone, distracted, but I could see it the way she glanced at Cassian, the way she deferred, the way she folded into his narrative, like it was safer than constructing her own. Isn't he something, she said without looking up. He was. Just not in the way she meant. I looked around the glowing lawn, the clinking glasses, the toasts being raised, to a man whose past might not exist, and I felt that slow, familiar ache rise in my chest. It was the same feeling I'd had standing in courtrooms with clients who realized too late that the person they'd loved wasn't who they thought. And now that person might be walking straight into our family arms, open with Paris and promises in hand. And none of them could see the cost. Not yet. By Saturday morning, the entire family had been seduced. Cassian Vaughn had a way of moving through a room that made people pause, lean in, forget their questions. Over breakfast on the terrace, he complimented my mother's silver bracelet and somehow segued that into a charming story about how his grandmother used to wear something just like it when she played piano in Havana. Later at the trail walk Sutton organized, he held the arm of our great-aunt Willa over the uneven path like he was guiding royalty, and when she laughed too hard and stumbled, he caught her, gently murmuring, I've got you with the ease of a man who always does. Ellis watched him from a distance, quiet and measured. He didn't say much as Cassian floated from cousin to cousin nephew to uncle absorbing family lore, as if he'd been part of it for years. I caught Ellis's gaze once across the fire pit during the afternoon marshmallow roast, and he gave me the faintest shake of his head. I knew what it meant. Be careful. Cassian didn't overplay it. That was the dangerous part. He didn't insert himself too boldly. He asked questions, remembered names, complimented just enough to flatter but never tip into the saccharine. When he spoke to my father, he inquired about solar development near Colorado Springs, referencing a white paper I knew had only been shared in limited industry circles. Your insight on the permitting process was brilliant. He said to Dad, I think it reframed the way several of my associates approach state-level proposals. My father, usually reserved and unimpressed, actually blinked in appreciation and asked if Cassian might want to grab lunch next time he was in town. Over dinner that evening, during a family-style spread on the patio, Cassian stood and raised his glass. To Lyra, he said, voiceful and calm and perfectly rehearsed for being the person who reminded me that love isn't something you chase, it's something you notice right there waiting for you to stop running. The table melted. Even I had to admit it was a damn good toast. Lyra blushed so deeply her collarbone turned pink, and Sutton pressed a hand to her chest like her daughter had just been crowned. Someone clapped. Another aunt wiped a tear, and I sipped my wine in silence, watching Ellis's hand flex once against his knee. Cassian told stories over dessert, funny ones, just self-deprecating enough. He told the one about nearly setting his own kitchen on fire, trying to flambe bananas Foster on a first date, how he once bought an entire train ticket for the wrong day in Spain and slept on a bench in Seville next to a nun who snored. She beat me at chess the next morning, he added, grinning. He told everyone how Lyra had changed his life, how he'd spent years thinking he had to prove something to the world. But she didn't need me to be more than I was, just honest, present, That's love, isn't it? I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to believe him. But my mind kept drifting backward 8 years to another man with perfect posture and polished shoes. A man Sutton had dated briefly, charming, kind, until the day we found out he'd taken 2 checks from our mother's purse and used her address to sign up for a credit card under a different name. Back then, I'd believed people showed you who they were quickly, that if you paid attention, you could stop disaster before it bloomed. But I'd been wrong. That man had looked Sutton in the eye, slept in our guest room, toasted my father's birthday with a bottle of port, and smiled the whole time. We'd learned to be polite, even to danger. And now, here we were again. I kept waiting for someone else in the family to see it, a look that didn't land right, a detail that slipped, something misaligned, but the longer I waited, the more I realized Cassian wasn't slipping. He wasn't messy. He was calculated. His compliments to my cousins specific. I saw your ceramic series online. Your brushwork is mesmerizing. Do you use a water-heavy glaze, or is that texture from the clay body? To my brother-in-law who coached high school football. It's not about the wins, right? It's the boys who come back 10 years later and say, "You believed in me." That's legacy. To me, during a brief lull between courses, Ellis mentioned, "You helped broker a zoning deal in Boulder last fall." That must have been a nightmare. You're the kind of person who makes things happen behind the scenes. Families run because someone like you holds the line. I didn't smile. Because that's exactly the sort of line you give someone when you want to keep them comfortable while you're studying them. Later that night, when the guests began retreating to their rooms and the catering staff started quietly stacking empty platters, I stepped outside for air. Ellis followed a minute later, joining me near the garden steps. "He's good," I said. "Too good," he replied. I hesitated. Could we be wrong? He didn't answer right away. Then, sure. But if I'm right and we do nothing, we'll be cleaning up pieces for the next 10 years. I folded my arms. No one else seems to see it. They're not looking. I thought of Lyra's face earlier, her eyes shining as Cassian brushed a strand of hair from her cheek. Of Sutton's eagerness, how she lit up when he talked about helping with the gallery. Of my father nodding as Cassian spoke investments. A part of me still wanted to be wrong, but another part, the part of me that had brokered deals, drafted contracts, dissected deposition testimony, had already seen too much. He was building something, carefully, silently, and no one knew what it would cost. Not yet. We waited until the next morning to talk, not because we wanted to, because we had to. The party schedule was packed: brunch, horseback riding for the cousins, some kind of sunset wine and charcuterie affair planned by Sutton down by the lodge's south fire pit. And between each event, Cassian was there, warm, present, helpful. Hand on Lyra's back napkin folded and placed beside my father's plate, before he even asked, laughing at old stories like he'd lived them. But by 10:30 the next morning, while most of the family was out on the ranch trail, Ellis and I ducked into the small library room off the main lobby. There was a chessboard mid-game and a window seat overlooking the foothills. It was quiet, private. I sat cross-legged on the tufted bench and waited while Ellis pulled out his phone and unlocked a folder he'd clearly prepared. He handed it to me without speaking. On the screen was a headshot, not quite a mugshot, but close enough. The man in the photo wore a navy sport coat and had a clean-shaven jaw. His hair was darker, shorter styled conservatively. But the eyes were the same, piercing, charismatic, calculating. His name was Caleb Vaughn Ellis, said, sliding into the armchair across from me. 6 years ago, my brother met him at a medtech convention in San Diego. Caleb said he was a private equity investor, claimed he had a background in health tech, and was launching a biotech incubator out of Seattle. He paused. My brother was a surgeon too, ENT, smart guy, but emotionally generous. He was tired of hospitals, burnt out. Caleb convinced him to invest in a startup that was supposedly developing implantable diagnostic sensors. Sounds impressive, I murmured. It wasn't real. None of it. Ellis tapped the screen again, revealing more documents, screenshots of business registration forms, stock offering statements, LinkedIn profiles that had long since been deleted. The company never existed. My brother wired just under $90,000 before he realized something was off. The guy vanished within a week, Clean exit, no confrontation, just disappeared. Left behind a fake address and a few staged social media accounts, and the police I asked, even though I already knew where this was going, they filed a report, but there wasn't much to follow. The accounts were in shell names, the phone numbers burned. The only lead was a partial surveillance image from a bank branch in Arizona, where he withdrew the final wire wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap. I looked again at the picture, the one with no hat, no glasses. Ellis, I said slowly, you're sure I'm not 100%, but I'm close. And Malin, my gut, hasn't screamed this loudly in a long time. I handed the phone back and exhaled, the weight of his words settling across my chest, like wet wool. He goes by Cassian now, I said. Ellis nodded. It fits. Just unique enough to be believable. And our family thinks he's a tech angel investor. I added the bitterness slipping through despite my best efforts. Dad asked him about fintech last night. I think he's planning to invite him into the firm's next retreat. Ellis raised his eyebrows. That'd be a hell of a disaster. I stood pacing once along the rug before turning to face him. What do we do? Ellis leaned back in the chair, fingers steepled. You're the legal one. You tell me. We need proof. This, I gestured at his phone, is a maybe? We can't blow this up at brunch over a face match and a hunch. He didn't argue, just nodded. I looked back toward the lobby window. Outside, Lyra and Cassian stood near the corral, laughing. He had his arms around her shoulders, his mouth close to her ear. She was smiling in that open, unguarded way that made her look 10 years younger. I hate this, I whispered. I hate watching her fall for someone I can't trust. I know, Ellis said, but we've got to move smart. If we accuse him too early and we're wrong, we won't be wrong, I said quietly. But if we do it without evidence, he continued, he'll just spin it. He's good at that. He'll paint us as overprotective, controlling, maybe even jealous. He wasn't wrong. I could already hear Sutton saying it. Let Lyra be happy. Why are you always the one who has to make it complicated? May and Lyra. She'd believe him. Right now, in this version of her life, he was the dream. The man who listened, who planned, who promised. We need more than a name, I said. We need financial records, patterns, something that proves he's done this before and is doing it again. Ellis nodded. I still have a contact in private investigations. Guy named Russo. He's semi-retired now, but he owes me a favor. I can call him today. And I'll reach out to Catherine Whitlow, one of my closest friends from law school. She'd worked in federal compliance and white-collar fraud investigations for the better part of a decade. If anyone could help me track assets, trace identities, or verify shell companies, it was her. We keep this quiet, I said. For now. Agreed. We sat in silence for a moment, just long enough for the gravity of it to settle. I thought about Lyra as a baby, how she used to sleep on my chest when Sutton couldn't handle the crying, how I'd taken her to first-grade orientation when Sutton had a migraine and couldn't get out of bed. Lyra wasn't just my niece, she was mine in all the ways that mattered. And now, she was engaged to a man who might have stolen more than just money in the past. He might be about to steal everything. Ellis stood and reached for my hand. Whatever happens, we do this together. I squeezed his hand once, steadying myself. Let's find out who this man really is. Because the one smiling on our lawn, the one everyone thought they knew, was nothing but a ghost in a borrowed name. I waited. She looked good, I had to admit. Loose waves, oversized sunglasses on her head, white knit sweater, slouchy in that curated way that said, wealth without trying. Aesthetics had always been her strength, packaging, staging sparkle, but never follow through. Finally, she said, Cassian's been helping me with the gallery. I said nothing. You know, I've been looking. This space on Larimer came up corner lot skylights. It's different. This one's mine. That's great, I said cautiously. Didn't know you'd finalized anything. She gave a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Not finalized. Not yet. But Cassian introduced me to a finance consultant, helped me structure a short-term fund, and set up the account. You opened a business account. Technically, it's an investment vehicle, just to hold the seed money before the lease goes through, and whose name is on the account. Her smile faltered. That's where I needed help. My credit's still a little shot. Remember last year, I remember? So Cassian suggested using a more stable identity, just temporarily. Until the investor check clears. I already knew what she was about to say. I used yours, she admitted, eyes on her cup. Silence hung between us. Sutton, I said quietly, what exactly did you do? She squirmed. It's not a big deal, it's just your name on some forms. No money's been touched. It's placeholder stuff. You used my name. On financial paperwork, I copied your signature. From that old grant letter, Cassian's contact handled the rest. My fingers tightened on the table's edge. You forged my signature. I wasn't stealing, I just needed to show collateral. You wouldn't have known if I hadn't told you, which is exactly the problem. Sutton's face colored. I trusted him. He's helped more in 3 months than anyone else in years. I thought, if I could just get this off the ground, you used me. You never believed in me, she snapped. You covered Lyra's tuition, paid Mom's hospital bills, but when I needed backing for something of my own, you told me to wait. That it was a bad climate. Because I was the one who dealt with the fallout from your last ventures, I said. Debt collectors don't forget. She straightened in her chair. You always play the martyr. Maybe I was just tired of asking for help, and instead I said coldly, you took it without asking. We sat there, 2 sisters divided by a teacup and a growing chasm. A waiter approached, sensed the chill, and quietly retreated. Finally, Sutton whispered, I'm sorry. I really thought if it worked you'd be proud of me. I looked at her, this woman I used to braid hair for when Mom forgot school mornings. The same girl I'd defended in school and driven home from parties she should never have attended. Now, at 48, still reaching for shortcuts, still dragging my name behind hers like a safety net. I need that paperwork, I said, rising from my seat. I'll send it. Now. She hesitated. Cassian has it. He keeps the files. Of course he did. I didn't wait for more. I stepped outside into the sharp mountain air wind, cutting through the shock that had settled into something clearer. This wasn't just about Lyra anymore. It was about me, and I wasn't staying quiet. By the time I reached our room, Ellis was standing at the desk phone, in one hand scribbling in a notepad. He looked up. What happened? I grabbed a bottle of sparkling water, twisted the cap, drank half, and said, Sutton forged my signature. Ellis froze. She what? She opened an investment account under my name, said it was temporary, a formality to help fund her gallery. Cassian's contact did the paperwork. Ellis's expression darkened. You didn't authorize it? Of course not. She copied my signature from an old grant letter. He swore under his breath. He's escalating. I called Catherine Whitlow, a friend from law school and now a fraud counsel in Chicago. When she picked up, I cut to the chase. I need a background check. Quiet. On a man named Cassian Vaughn. He's also used Caleb Vaughn, possibly Jordan Hale. There was a pause. Typing. Then give me a minute. Ellis clicked away on his laptop while I paced. 10 minutes later, Catherine was back. 3 aliases matched Cassian Vaughn, Caleb Vaughn, and Jordan Hale. Birth dates shift slightly. Addresses vary, but the patterns match. I gripped the phone tighter. Cassian Vaughn is tied to a dormant Denver LLC registered 3 months ago. The second signatory, Sutton R. Myers. I closed my eyes. She signed something without knowing. Caleb Vaughn was sued in Washington for breach of fiduciary duty. Settled quickly. No conviction. And Jordan Hale worse. There's an open warrant in Florida grand theft real estate fraud. He got a 73-year-old woman to co-sign a $1.4 million land deal. She lost her retirement fund. He vanished. My stomach twisted. His MO, I asked. Classic affinity fraud, Catherine said. He embeds into families. Targets emotionally open women young or older with assets. Claims to be in finance or tech. Gains trust. Then merges finances, sets up shell companies, and disappears. Ellis came to stand beside me. I didn't look up. Victims usually sign willingly, Catherine continued. They feel too ashamed to report. That makes him harder to catch. I asked, Do you see anything recent financial activity? Nothing yet, she said. But if someone gave him access under their name, I whispered, like Sutton, or me, I'll send a secure upload folder, get me whatever you can loan applications account activity, and mail and lock down your financial access now. I will, she added. Assume he's watching. Guys like him don't just con, they anticipate. After we hung up, I sat on the edge of the bed. My hands were trembling. Ellis joined me. Bad, worse than bad. He's done this at least 3 times. One woman lost everything. He's using Sutton and Lyra and trying to use you. I nodded slowly. It's not just about money, it's about credibility, access, and I gave him the key by doing nothing. Ellis gripped my hand. We're not done. No. Now we had names, documents, and Catherine on our side. Cassian Vaughn, Caleb Jordan, whoever he was, wasn't slipping away this time. Not with my family, not with my name, not without a fight. I found Sutton, alone on the overlook behind the lodge, sitting on the low stone wall with her hands tucked into the sleeves of her sweater like a teenager. The snow-dusted trees below stretched for miles, their dark green boughs muted by the thin veil of late afternoon fog. She didn't turn when she heard my footsteps crunch over the gravel. I figured you'd find me, she said quietly. I stopped a few feet away studying her profile. Her lipstick had worn off and she looked tired. Not just from the day, but from holding something too long. You knew, I said. She exhaled the breath white in the cold air. Ellis told you everything. I didn't answer. She already knew the answer. Sutton nodded, then finally turned to face me. It wasn't supposed to go this far. I stayed where I was. You knew who he was, that he wasn't who he claimed to be. She looked down at her hands. I didn't know everything, not at first. He said his past was complicated, that he used different names for privacy after a bad breakup with a business partner, that people had tried to ruin him, and you believed him. I wanted to, she said, her voice small. He was the first person in years who made me feel like I still had something left to offer, like I could build something beautiful again. Sutton, he has a warrant. In Florida, under one of his other names. He's done this before families, women, businesses. He's a professional predator. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I know. The silence between us thickened. I moved closer slowly until I could see the fine lines at the corners of her eyes, the way she was blinking too often. Why didn't you tell me? I asked. Because I knew what you'd say, she said bitterly. You'd look at me like this, like I was broken. Again. Like I needed fixing. I was just trying to give Lyra a beautiful life, a wedding, a future. Something untouched by all the mistakes I made. I stared at her. By handing her to a con artist, I thought I could control it. She snapped. I thought I could manage him long enough to get the gallery open, to secure the loans, to make everything look stable. I didn't want your pity again, Malin. I wanted your respect. I was stunned. You think this is about pity? She stood up then, wrapping her arms around herself. You've saved us 1,000 times. You wrote the tuition checks. You covered the heating bills after the divorce. You co-signed the lease when no one else would. But you never let me forget it. Not once. My breath caught. That's not fair, isn't it? She said, her voice rising now. You carry this quiet judgment like it's virtue, like being the responsible one makes you better. You don't yell, you don't shame, but you hover and you fix, and you make everyone feel like a burden you're too noble to drop. I blinked, stunned. Sutton stepped closer, eyes glassy. We were drowning Maylin. And you weren't going to save us forever. Cassian offered a way out. Maybe it was stupid. Maybe I looked the other way when things didn't add up. But at least he made me feel like I could breathe again. I pressed my hands to my temples. You didn't just risk your own life, you risked Lyra's. You used my name, you gave a stranger access to our family. He's not a stranger to Lyra, Sutton said quietly. She loves him. She thinks he's her future. That's because you let him in first. Her shoulders slumped. I know. Something inside me cracked then, not cleanly, but slowly like a seam giving way under pressure. You were supposed to be the one I could trust, I whispered. Everyone else, I get it. They forget they float, they fall for the show, but not you, not you. She wiped a tear from her cheek. I thought if I told you sooner, you'd stop it. And I needed it to work. Just long enough. I thought maybe he'd really change for us. For Lyra. For me. I stepped back. He's not going to change. He's going to take everything and disappear. And you gave him a head start. She didn't argue. I looked away, blinking into the pine-covered haze, trying to keep my voice level. You still have the documents? She nodded. Most of them are in my folder. The rest, Cassian has. You need to send me copies. All of them. Today. I will. I took a long breath. Do you want to stop the wedding? She didn't answer right away. Sutton. I don't know, she said finally, her voice barely audible. If we do, Lyra might never forgive me, and if we don't, she might lose everything. She covered her face with both hands. God, what have I done? I didn't answer. There was nothing else to say. After a long pause, I turned and walked away back toward the lodge. I didn't wait for her to follow. Inside, the party buzzed on music drifting through the warm air, champagne flutes, clinking laughter rolling down the hallways like nothing had shifted. But it had. I climbed the stairs to our room, found Ellis by the window reading over Catherine's updated email with the Florida warrant attached. He looked up. She knew I said. His eyes narrowed, and she thought she could manage him. Said I'd been saving them too long. He said nothing for a beat. Then what do you want to do? I exhaled slowly, the weight pressing in on every inch of me. We stop the wedding, I said. We don't give him another second. Ellis nodded. Then we do it together. And for the first time in days, I let myself believe we could. The call came just after 8 the next morning. Malin was sitting on the edge of the bed with a mug of lukewarm coffee when her phone buzzed. The screen flashed with a name she hadn't seen in over 6 months. Lara Jeffries' First Heights Bank. She answered immediately. Lara. May. Hey. Sorry to call early. I almost didn't, but I couldn't let this go until Monday. Malin sat straighter. What happened? Lara hesitated. There's a file that came across my desk late Friday. It's flagged for senior review because of the name attached to it. Yours. Malin felt her stomach drop. What kind of file? A bridging loan. $250,000. Under your name, your credentials even listed your firm. It looked legitimate, but only at first glance. The final authorization was delayed because we were waiting for a supplemental document. Whoever submitted it assumed it would clear today, but we're closed for the weekend. She paused. May, did you authorize a $250,000 loan this week? Absolutely not. Then someone is actively using your identity, and they're getting bolder. Malin stood and moved to the window, heart pounding. Outside, a gentle layer of frost shimmered over the lodge rooftops, but her blood ran hot with fury. Can you send me everything? The file, the metadata, the account history? Already did. Secure Dropbox, and I froze the application. But whoever's behind it is good. Like, disturbingly good. The documentation was clean. The only red flag was that it came through a third-party processor we've flagged before for off-market property deals. Malin closed her eyes. Cassian, do you know the purpose of the loan? According to the form, it's a capital injection for a real estate partnership, a holding company formed 2 weeks ago under the name Croswell Development. That company lists you and one other principal, Sutton R. Myers. Her breath caught. She doesn't even know what that is. I thought as much. May this thing was hours from going through. If Monday hadn't been a holiday... Thank you, Malin said. Seriously, you may have just saved my life. I figured you'd want to know before anything hits your credit file or worse. They ended the call, and Malin stood in stunned silence until Ellis appeared in the doorway, already dressed in jeans and a dark pullover. He took one look at her face. What happened? They tried to push a loan through, she said, voice tight. A $250,000, using my name, my firm. All fake. It would have cleared today if the bank wasn't closed. His jaw clenched. Cassian, and apparently through a holding company with Sutton's name on it. Ellis crossed the room and picked up her phone from the desk. Do you have the documents? She nodded. They're in a secure folder. I need to send them to Catherine. He looked at her. We need to stop this before Monday. That loan clears, it won't just be credit damage. He'll have leverage. Malin was already typing a message to Catherine, attaching the loan packet and highlighting the forged data. Her hands trembled only slightly now. Anger had crystallized into cold focus. I want to file a formal fraud alert, she said. On my name, Sutton's and the shell company, and I want to alert Lyra, but not yet. Not until we have something she can hold in her hands. Ellis nodded. Then we're working today. All day. No brunch. No photo shoots. We track everything he's touched. We build a case. Malin sat back and looked out the window again. The sun was climbing higher now, warming the frost, but the tension in her chest only deepened. She had 48 hours, maybe less. Because if Cassian Vaughn got that money, it wouldn't just be theft. It would be war. Lyra wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the hallway behind the private lounge. The engagement brunch was still winding down guests, still sipping their second mimosas and posing in front of the white floral arch Sutton had insisted be flown in from Napa. Malin had slipped away with Ellis to call Catherine from the back corridor. Low voices locked, door phone on speaker, confident that the chaos of celebration would keep prying eyes away. She was wrong. The click of heels came first, then a pause. A shadow by the frosted glass of the door. I knew it. Lyra's voice cut through high and sharp like cracked porcelain. You've been whispering about him behind my back. What is going on? Malin's heart stopped. Ellis turned, already stepping toward the door, but Lyra pushed in before he could open it. Her face was flushed, and her expression brittle, somewhere between rage and panic. Tell me what you're not saying. Her voice cracked. I heard you say, fake name and fraud alert. Is this about Cassian? Malin exchanged a quick look with Ellis. No more time. Close the door, Malin said gently. Lyra did. Her fingers were trembling as she clicked it shut. She stayed standing, arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for impact. I deserve the truth, she said. Not from Sutton, not from anyone else. From you. Malin pulled a chair from the corner and gestured for Lyra to sit, but she shook her head. Please, Malin said, voice soft. This isn't going to be easy. I don't want easy. Her eyes welled. I want real. Malin reached for the tablet on the table beside her and opened the folder Catherine had labeled CV, alias, files. She tapped through quickly until the 3 driver's license scans came into view. Lyra leaned over, breath-catching. What is this? The man you know as Cassian Vaughn has used at least 2 other identities. Caleb Vaughn and Jordan Hale, Malin said, both linked to criminal investigations, including a federal warrant in Florida for real estate fraud. Lyra covered her mouth with her hand. Ellis stepped in gently. My brother almost married him. 6 years ago. Caleb Vaughn. He took $400,000 and vanished 3 weeks before the wedding. Lyra dropped her hand. No. He's not like that. You must be wrong. Malin pulled up the comparison overlay Cassian's engagement photo and Caleb's Florida mugshot. Same cheek scar, same eyes. The hair was longer now. The smile was newer. But it was him. Lyra blinked rapidly, then backed away from the table. No, that doesn't make sense. He proposed to me in Paris. He planned our whole trip. He met Grandma. He knows my favorite wine. Her voice shook. He cried when we talked about kids. I believe he did, Malin said, standing now. But you need to know he's done it before. Every gesture, every detail, it's part of how he earns trust. And once that trust is deep enough, he exploits it. Ellis added, we have evidence that he attempted to take out a $250,000 loan using Malin's name and credentials without her consent. Through a shell company. The only reason it hasn't gone through is because Monday is a bank holiday. Lyra's face went white. She stumbled slightly, then sat hard on the edge of the couch. I think I'm going to be sick. Malin grabbed the wastebasket just in time. Lyra bent forward, retching with a dry, desperate sound. Ellis crouched beside her, rubbing her back as she vomited again. Malin sat silently, guilt roiling in her stomach alongside the anger. She had wanted to protect Lyra from this, but now the truth was its own violence. Lyra pulled a tissue from the box on the end table and wiped her mouth. Was any of it real? She whispered. Anything. Malin crouched beside her. You are real, she said. Your heart, your dreams, the love you gave him. All of that was yours, and it matters. But his part? No, sweetheart. He doesn't know how to love in the way you do. Lyra clutched the tissue, her knuckles white. So, he was just using me. Ellis hesitated. He saw an opportunity, a family with money, a niece with a big heart, and generous relatives. Yes. Silence pressed in around them like fog. Then Lyra whispered, I want to be there. Malin frowned. For what? When we tell him, she said, when we take it all down? I want to see his face when he realizes it's over, that we know, that he didn't win. Malin stared at her. She saw the girl beneath the perfect curls, the flawless ring, the hand-stitched invitations. She saw the heartbreak, but also something sharper rising underneath something earned. You don't have to, Malin said gently. But I do, Lyra said. I need to be the one who ends it. Malin reached over and took her hand. Then we do it together. Lyra's eyes brimmed again. This time she let the tears fall. Somewhere outside the room, laughter floated up the stairs and through the crack in the door. The party hadn't stopped. The world hadn't noticed the rupture. But Malin knew after this, nothing in their family would ever look the same again. Lyra wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the hallway behind the private lounge. The engagement brunch was still winding down, guests still sipping their second mimosas and posing in front of the white floral arch Sutton had insisted be flown in from Napa. Malin had slipped away with Ellis to call Catherine from the back corridor. Low voices locked door phone on speaker, confident that the chaos of celebration would keep prying eyes away. She was wrong. The click of heels came first, then a pause. A shadow by the frosted glass of the door. I knew it. Lyra's voice cut through, high and sharp like cracked porcelain. You've been whispering about him behind my back. What is going on? Malin's heart stopped. Ellis turned, already stepping toward the door, but Lyra pushed in before he could open it. Her face was flushed, and her expression brittle, somewhere between rage and panic. Tell me what you're not saying. Her voice cracked. I heard you say fake name and fraud alert. Is this about... Cassie and Malin exchanged a quick look with Ellis. No more time. Close the door, Malin said gently. Lyra did. Her fingers were trembling as she clicked it shut. She stayed standing, arms wrapped around herself like she was bracing for impact. I deserve the truth, she said. Not from Sutton. Not from anyone else, from you. Malin pulled a chair from the corner and gestured for Lyra to sit, but she shook her head. Please, Malin said, voice soft. This isn't going to be easy. I don't want easy. Her eyes welled. I want real. Malin reached for the tablet on the table beside her and opened the folder Catherine had labeled CV alias files. She tapped through quickly until the 3 driver's license scans came into view. Lyra leaned over, breath-catching. What is this? The man you know as Cassian Vaughn has used at least 2 other identities, Caleb Vaughn and Jordan Hale, Malin said. Both linked to criminal investigations, including a federal warrant in Florida for real estate fraud. Lyra covered her mouth with her hand. Ellis stepped in gently. My brother almost married him. 6 years ago. Caleb Vaughn. He took $400, $2,000 and vanished 3 weeks before the wedding. Lyra dropped her hand. No, that's not... He's not like that. You must be wrong. Malin pulled up the comparison overlay Cassian's engagement photo and Caleb's Florida mugshot. Same cheek scar, same eyes, the hair was longer now, the smile was newer, but it was him. Lyra blinked rapidly, then backed away from the table. No, that doesn't make sense. He proposed to me in Paris. He planned our whole trip. He met Grandma. He knows my favorite wine. Her voice shook. He cried when we talked about kids. I believe he did, Malin said, standing now. But you need to know he's done it before. Every gesture, every detail, it's part of how he earns trust. And once that trust is deep enough, he exploits it. Ellis added, we have evidence that he attempted to take out a $250,000 loan using Malin's name and credentials without her consent. Through a shell company. The only reason it hasn't gone through is because Monday's a bank holiday. Lyra's face went white. She stumbled slightly then, sat hard on the edge of the couch. I think I'm going to be sick. Malin grabbed the wastebasket just in time. Lyra bent forward, retching with a dry, desperate sound. Ellis crouched beside her, rubbing her back as she vomited again. Malin sat silently, guilt roiling in her stomach alongside the anger. She had wanted to protect Lyra from this, but now the truth was its own violence. Lyra pulled a tissue from the box on the end table and wiped her mouth. Was any of it real? She whispered. Anything Malin crouched beside her. You are real, she said. Your heart, your dreams, the love you gave him. All of that was yours, and it matters. But his part? No, sweetheart. He doesn't know how to love in the way you do. Lyra clutched the tissue, her knuckles white. So he was just using me. Ellis hesitated. He saw an opportunity. A family with money. A niece with a big heart and generous relatives. Yes. Silence pressed in around them like fog. Then Lyra whispered, I want to be there. Malin frowned. For what? When we tell him, she said. When we take it all down? I want to see his face when he realizes it's over, that we know that he didn't win. Malin stared at her. She saw the girl beneath the perfect curls, the flawless ring, the hand-stitched invitations. She saw the heartbreak, but also something sharper rising underneath something earned. You don't have to, Malin said gently. But I do, Lyra said. I need to be the one who ends it. Malin reached over and took her hand. Then we do it together. Lyra's eyes brimmed again. This time, she let the tears fall. Somewhere outside the room, laughter floated up the stairs and through the crack in the door. The party hadn't stopped. The world hadn't noticed the rupture. But Malin knew after this nothing in their family would ever look the same again. The lodge dining room glowed with a soft gold warmth, candles flickering against the glass as the family gathered for what was supposed to be a celebratory dinner. The table was set with Sutton's best China winter florals in silver vases, and enough wine to suggest good cheer. But underneath it all, beneath the roast chicken aroma, beneath the laughter, Malin could feel the pressure, building like a fault line. Ellis sat across from her, one finger tapping a slow rhythm on the stem of his glass. Lyra, still pale from the night before, smiled tightly at Cassian, who had his arm draped casually over the back of her chair. Sutton was radiant, buzzing with the kind of energy that looked like joy but came from adrenaline. Malin had seen it before. That was how her sister smiled when something fragile was balancing on the edge of hope. Dinner had just been served when Ellis stood. He raised his glass not in a toast, but as a cue. Before dessert, he said we'd like to show something, just a few minutes. A little surprise for the family. Cassian looked amused. A slideshow? At dinner. A short one, Malin said, rising with him. About our guest of honor. She moved toward the small projector Ellis had set up earlier, connecting it to her laptop. The screen that dropped down behind the table had once been used for movie nights at the lodge. Tonight, it would show something very different. The room dimmed slightly. Malin's hands didn't shake as she opened the folder titled Cassian Vaughn, a.k.a. The first image appeared a sharp, well-lit headshot of Cassian from a tech innovator's profile. The caption read, Cassian Vaughn, private equity investor. Cassian gave a little mock bow. Flattering. You really didn't have to. The next slide cut the air, a mugshot. Caleb Vaughn, 2017. Miami-Dade County, wire fraud. Then another. Jordan Hale, 2019, Oakland, real estate scam, pending warrant. Silence spread like frost. Sutton looked from the screen to Cassian, confusion splintering into fear. Lyra's breath hitched her fork halfway to her mouth. What is this? She whispered. Ellis's voice was calm. 3 aliases. 1 man. Same facial markers, same pattern. He targets women from wealthy families, builds quick trust, creates joint holdings, and then vanishes. Cassian stood slowly. You're joking, right? Malin advanced to the next slide, overlapping driver's licenses with highlighted jawlines and hairlines. Then court records, then bank filings, then the application for the $250,000 bridging loan, with her name on it. That's your signature, Cassian said, trying to sound wounded. No, Malin said, her voice steady. It's a forgery. And the account A-Shell Company formed 2 weeks ago with Sutton's name on the documents. She didn't know. I didn't consent. But you, Cassian, or Caleb, or Jordan, you did. Sutton's chair scraped loudly against the floor as she half stood, her voice cracking. Cassian, please tell me this isn't... But Lyra beat him to it. She stood. Did you ever love me? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Cassian looked at her. And for the first time that evening, he dropped the act. His smile faltered, lips twitching slightly before curling into something colder disdain, maybe. Or boredom. You proposed in front of the Eiffel Tower, she continued, tears welling. Was that real, any of it? He shrugged. It was... efficient. Lyra's face crumpled. She reached for her water glass with trembling hands, but Sutton stepped between them. You used us, she said to Cassian. You said you'd help with the gallery, that you just needed my credit to open a new partnership, and you gave it. Malin said not unkindly. Because you wanted to believe he could fix what you couldn't. But now, he's about to walk out the door unless we decide otherwise. Ellis stepped forward. We've sent the documents to law enforcement. The fraud alert is active. The warrant from Florida is still open. If you walk out now, Cassian, you won't get far. Cassian laughed softly. You really think this family can afford a scandal? No, Malin said. Which is why we're not hiding this. Not for you. Not anymore. He paused, looked around the room, weighed the risk, then locked eyes with Lyra. I was the best thing that ever happened to you, he said. And you'll realize that when the next man wants your trust fund and not your face. Lyra didn't flinch. She picked up her fork and calmly stabbed it into a piece of chicken eyes, never leaving him. You can leave now, she said, voice icy. Or wait for the sheriff. Cassian smirked once more, then walked out. No one followed. No one spoke. The room held the scent of rosemary and ruin. Malin slowly sat back down. Across the table, Ellis exhaled deeply. And somewhere down the hall, a door slammed. Cassian didn't make it far. He got as far as the front foyer, just past the antique coat rack and the family portrait in its heavy walnut frame before he stopped. Maybe it was the way Ellis moved so calmly toward the door, or maybe it was the fact that two unfamiliar SUVs had pulled up the winding gravel path, headlights still on engines humming with idle restraint. Malin followed with quiet, measured steps, her breath slow and tight. Lyra hovered behind her arms, crossed over her chest like armor, face blank. Sutton remained seated in the dining room, unmoving, her head bowed as if in prayer or shame. Cassian turned, his smile now a straight line. So this is how it ends, he asked. A public execution at the dinner table. Ellis didn't answer. He simply opened the door. Two agents stepped inside, dark suits badges displayed but not shouted. One was tall and lean, the other shorter, with a voice that was surprisingly gentle as he said, Cassian Vaughn, also known as Caleb Vaughn. Also known as Jordan Hale, you're under federal investigation for wire fraud, bank fraud, and identity theft across multiple jurisdictions. Cassian raised his hands halfway, almost amused. Do you read me my rights now, or after dessert? Now works, the taller one said, but Cassian wasn't done. Before you drag me off, he said, voice sharpening, you might want to let me speak, because the only thing worse than a con is a half-told story. And you, he pointed at Malin, have been playing half-truths since you walked in. Malin didn't flinch. I never lied, Cassian said. Not really. Love, please, love is currency. You give it to get something back. I never promised anything I didn't deliver. Lyra wanted a fairy tale. I gave her one. Sutton wanted prestige. I gave her that, too. A gallery, a man who used words like exposure and curation and European backing. She wanted to feel admired. I made sure she did. And Malin Ellis asked, arms folded. Cassian's mouth curled. Ah, Malin. The immovable pillar. The one no one thought could be reached. He took a step forward, now speaking just to her. You are the prize. If I could get your trust, the rest of this house would have fallen into line. You hold their stories, their shame, their debt. You've always been the ledger they never read. You planned this from the beginning, Malin asked. No, he said. I almost walked away. 3 weeks ago, when I realized Sutton's gallery was too risky, too messy. But she begged me to stay. Said she'd smooth things over, get access to accounts, said you'd come around. From the hallway, Sutton's voice cracked through the silence. I didn't mean for it to go that far. I thought Cassian held up a hand silencing her like a conductor ending a song. You thought I loved you, he said, but I was never here for love. I was here for leverage. The agent stepped closer. Sir, hands behind your back? Cassian didn't move. I'm not running, he said. What would be the point? I've already been tried and convicted in the court of family. You're being tried in a real one now, Ellis said flatly. That made Cassian laugh. He looked once more at Lyra. You'll miss me, not because of who I was, but because of who I let you be. Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't blink. I'll remember, she said softly. But I won't miss you. The cuffs clicked, quiet, but final. As the agents led him out, the door clicked shut behind them with the softest of thuds. Malin turned toward the hallway and found Sutton still standing there, arms wrapped around herself. He wasn't lying, Sutton said. I did beg him to stay. I was scared. I didn't know how else to save the gallery. The money, Lyra's wedding, everything just felt like it was slipping. Malin walked over and placed a hand on her sister's shoulder. You should have told me. You were always the strong one, Sutton whispered. I didn't want to admit I was weak. I wasn't always strong, Malin said. I just got tired of pretending everything was fine. Lyra appeared beside them. Her voice was quieter now, steadier. I should have seen it, but I wanted the story, the romance, the Instagram photos. I didn't want to believe he was just using us. He was using everyone, Malin said. But now it's over. Outside, the dark SUVs were already gone. The frost had started to return across the lawn, and inside the lodge the air felt different, emptier, but somehow cleaner. A mask had been lifted, and with it, a whole house of illusions had come tumbling down. But the fallout didn't end with him. Sutton's name appeared in the investigation listed as an unknowing but complicit party. Her gallery accounts were frozen, donations retracted. A single press mention was all it took for her board to step away. Within a week, the gallery closed its doors. She didn't cry, not in front of Malin. She simply sat on the edge of the guest bed and said, I just wanted something that was mine. Lyra moved out the next morning. She left the ring on the kitchen counter and her phone off for 3 days. When she finally turned it back on, she called Malin not her mother and asked if she could stay a while. Malin said yes, without hesitation. In the weeks that followed, the Croft home shifted into something it had never been quiet, calm, and honest. No grand gestures, just fresh coffee in the mornings, silent dinners when needed, and a lot of shared laundry loads. One night, Malin sat alone in her study staring at the folder of legal documents she'd compiled, statements forged, signatures, account screenshots. The war had ended, but the cleanup had only begun. She closed the folder and whispered to herself, being the rock isn't about rescuing everyone. Sometimes it's about holding ground when everyone else collapses. And this time, she hadn't moved. It was a Tuesday night when the three of them sat down for dinner. Just Ellis, Malin, and Lyra. No guests, no masks, no performance. The meal was simple. Rosemary chicken roasted carrots, a bottle of red wine opened halfway through. Lyra set down her fork, staring into her glass for a long moment before asking, Do you think I'll ever trust again? Malin looked at her niece, really looked. The eyes were tired but clearer. There was no mascara, no curled lashes, no filter. Just Lyra, stripped of illusion, finally asking the right question. She reached across the table. Yes, but not because you'll forget this. You won't. You shouldn't. Real love doesn't hide behind charm. It shows up over and over, especially when things get hard. Ellis raised his glass in quiet agreement. Later that night, when the dishes were done and the house finally still, Malin sat at her desk with a fresh page and wrote a letter. Not to anyone else, just to herself. Next time, trust your gut. The first time it clenches. She folded the note and tucked it into her drawer. Not as a warning, as a reminder. Because some things, the best things we keep,